I nearly dropped my coffee mug. That's how shocked I was the moment I stepped onto my porch and saw neon lights flashing just beyond my fence. Usually my land in Ridgeton County, an unassuming corner of Virginia, is as peaceful as it gets. My father raised cattle on this very pasture for over 40 years, then passed it on to me. I kept it mostly intact, saving just enough space for a vegetable patch and a small barn. But that day, well, it looked like the county fair had uprooted itself and landed right in my backyard. A Ferris wheel's top glowed red, bobbing above the tree line. Carnival booths stretched in a row where my grazing area used to be. I heard the faint squeal of children riding a tilt-a-whirl. Bright banners hung from wooden posts hammered right into my pasture soil. Clusters of people wandered around munching cotton candy and hot dogs. The worst part? It was all courtesy of the Mapleview Homeowners Association, a group that had been eyeing my land for months. Now you might wonder how an HOA could be so bold as to set up an entire carnival on private property. Let me tell you. Mapleview HOA, led by a certain Ms. Anita Barnes, had a reputation for pushing boundaries. They started small, fines for minor infractions, expanded community events that accidentally spilled onto neighbors' lawns. But this, a full-blown carnival crossing into my pasture? That was new. I walked down the porch steps, each footstep heavier than the last. I could practically feel my father's spirit stomping beside me, outraged that anyone would set foot on the land he treasured, let alone drive tent stakes into it. The nerve of these people. And the funny thing is, in my day job, I might seem an easy target. Folks know me around town simply as Mark Carter, polite landowner who keeps to himself. They don't realize my real career. But Ms. Barnes was about to learn I'm not just some quiet rancher. She'd messed with a man who wears a black robe by day, a man who's a sitting judge for the Ridgeton County Circuit Court. I marched straight to the edge of the carnival zone. A garish sign read, Mapleview Community Fair, all welcome. Then I spotted plastic tape marking the boundary between my land and the official HOA common area. The tape was cut or just flung aside, so the carnival clearly sprawled onto my side. A row of carnival workers in neon shirts scurried back and forth, hauling supplies from a truck parked near my barn. My fists clenched. How dare they use my barn as a loading area? But I swallowed my anger. I needed to gather facts first. Excuse me, I called to a young man carrying a crate of stuffed animals. What's going on here? Who authorized setting up booths on this pasture? He blinked, adjusting his cap. Ms. Barnes said the HOA had permission to expand. We were told this is all Mapleview property, so we're building a carnival fundraiser. He shrugged, face uncertain, as though he suspected something was off. All Mapleview property, huh? I muttered, scanning the row of booths creeping deeper into my field. Thanks for the info, I said curtly. Then I turned to see if I could spot Miss Barnes herself. Sure enough, near the Ferris wheel stood a tall woman in a crisp blazer, seemingly out of place among the carnival's bright chaos. That had to be Ms. Anita Barnes, the Mapleview HOA president. She was barking orders at a group of volunteers setting up a funnel cake stand. Her short brown hair was styled immaculately. Her posture exuded authority. I approached, tapping her lightly on the shoulder. She spun around. She blinked in recognition. "Oh, Mr. Carter," she said, feigning surprise. "I didn't expect you to be home today." Then a brittle smile. "We're hosting our annual Mapleview Community Fair. It's for a good cause. Proceeds go to local charities. We needed a bit more space this year." She gestured vaguely at my pasture, as if it were merely an empty lot. I raised an eyebrow. "A bit more space? Ms. Barnes, do you realize this entire carnival is on my private property?" My voice trembled with barely contained frustration. A flicker of annoyance crossed her features before she masked it with a tight-lipped grin. "I see your point, but the association has easements, boundary expansions, various permissions," she replied. "Besides, your land's just farmland, right? No harm in letting the community use it for one weekend. We assumed you'd be supportive." My blood pressure skyrocketed at her casual dismissal. "Easements? Ms. Barnes, I've never signed a single easement granting Mapleview the right to hold a carnival on my land. Not once. Where's your documentation? She waved a dismissive hand. It's all with the HOA's legal counsel. If you'd like, we can chat after the fair ends. But for now, families are showing up. Do you really want to spoil the event? She angled her chin, a challenge in her gaze, as if daring me to make a scene. I clenched my jaw. My position as a judge has taught me patience. If I blow up in front of these crowds, it might tarnish my reputation. So I forced a calm I barely felt, replying, "Fine, finish setting up. But we're talking as soon as possible." Ms. Barnes gave a small nod, turning back to her volunteers. Did I want to shut the fair down right then and there? Absolutely. But the sight of giggling kids and parents carrying cotton candy tempered my immediate reaction. For the moment, I decided to step back, gather evidence, and approach this systematically. Miss Barnes had no idea who she was messing with. That evening, the carnival roared to life under bright floodlights. Ferris wheel carts swung in the night air. A small stage hosted a local band. Cars lined the nearby streets, and unsuspecting families strolled across the pasture as though it belonged to them. The press of the crowd frustrated me beyond words. I retreated to my house, pacing in the living room while the muffled music rattled my windows. My older brother David dropped by to see what was wrong. He's a local attorney, ironically. He let out a low whistle when he saw the Ferris wheel from my front porch. "Mark," he said, "why is there a carnival on your land?" I gave a humorless laugh. The HOA decided to borrow my field. Ms. Barnes claims some fictional easement. I'm about ready to file for a trespassing injunction. David nodded, jaw clenched. I can help if you want, but you also know the system better than anyone in this county. Let me guess, you're giving them enough rope to hang themselves? I shrugged. Something like that. If they think I won't fight because I'm a quiet neighbor, they're dead wrong. Let them dig themselves deeper. David patted my shoulder, a flicker of pride in his eyes. He knows I rarely flex my authority, but this situation demanded a response. The next morning, I rose early to document the damage. The carnival was in full swing again, day 2. Parking attendants guided vehicles onto a stretch of grass near the barn, leaving tire ruts in the damp soil. A haunted house walk-through blocked a small access road. Worse, I spotted the fresh remains of trampled fence posts. My father's old sign, Carter Family Farm, lay face down, broken in half. I stomped over to a group of carnival workers. "Which one of you tore down that fence?" They looked at me blankly. "Miss Barnes told us the fence was in the way," a man offered sheepishly. "But I swear, I thought this was all HOA land." I took pictures of everything, the broken fence, the deep tire tracks, the random trash scattered across the grass. Then I recorded a short video capturing the carnival's sprawl, narrating how it extended far beyond any normal boundary. David joined me, shaking his head at the sheer magnitude of the intrusion. Around midday, a local news channel arrived to do a light-hearted segment on the carnival. I approached the reporter, a young woman in a bright blazer, introduced myself quietly, and suggested she might want to ask Miss Barnes about the property lines. She looked intrigued but uncertain. This was supposed to be a cheerful piece about a community fair. Still, I saw her ears perk up when I mentioned a land dispute. Moments later, she cornered Ms. Barnes for an interview near the carousel. Ms. Barnes put on her best politician smile, praising the HOA's effort to bring joy to the community, raising funds for local schools, blah blah. Then the reporter blindsided her. "We've heard from Mark Carter, the landowner, who says this carnival is on his private property without permission. Is that correct?" Ms. Barnes's smile froze. She stammered about miscommunication, that Mr. Carter has always been a neighborly figure and that we expected no issues. The reporter pressed, "So you have official permission?" Ms. Barnes danced around the question, muttering something about legal rights and old documents. I watched from the sidelines, arms folded, a small wave of satisfaction coursed through me. Ms. Barnes was cornered on camera, but would it be enough to stop her? As the afternoon wore on, I decided to confront Miss Barnes again. I found her near the cotton candy stand, adjusting a sign that read, HOA donations welcome. She turned, forced that polite smile. Mr. Carter, having fun yet? She said, sarcasm dripping from each word. Ms. Barnes, I said, voice low, this is day 2 of your carnival. You've destroyed my fence, trampled my land, and you still claim you have a right to be here? She lifted her chin. We have documentation. Our attorneys say there's an old farmland boundary line that puts part of this pasture under Mapleview's jurisdiction. If you insist, I'll have them forward the documents. I took a measured breath. Send whatever you want, but I can guarantee it won't hold up in court. She scoffed and turned to help a volunteer refill a popcorn machine. It was clear she had no intention of budging. In her mind, the carnival was a success, and I was just a grumpy landowner who wouldn't dare crush the community's fun. Little did she know, I'd already begun drafting an injunction. I also planned to prepare for a bigger reveal, my actual identity as a judge. While a few folks in town recognized me from official photographs, Ms. Barnes apparently never put 2 and 2 together. She might have known there was a Judge Carter in Ridgeton, but never connected that I was the same man quietly living on the outskirts. That evening, day 2 concluded. The carnival lights shut off around 10 p.m., leaving behind an eerie silence. I stepped outside to assess the damage in the moonlight. My phone buzzed. A text from David. County clerk confirms no new boundary lines were recorded for Mapleview. They're bluffing. Perfect. That was the confirmation I needed. On day 3, I woke to a headache, fueled by stress and the constant carnival noise. Enough was enough. By mid-morning, I met David at the local courthouse. We filed an emergency trespassing injunction citing property damage, potential safety hazards, and the total lack of any documented easement. We submitted photos, statements, and the broken fence as evidence. The clerk, Miss Lopez, frowned sympathetically. This is outrageous. A carnival on your land? I'll expedite this for you, Judge Carter. She paused, realizing her slip of the tongue. She knew me by my official capacity. David cast me a sideways glance. We'd been careful not to broadcast my position too loudly, but Ms. Lopez was discreet. She processed the paperwork swiftly. By the afternoon, we had a signed court order to shut down any unauthorized event on my property. The sheriff's office would enforce it if necessary. We arrived at the carnival's final scheduled day, brandishing the injunction. Ms. Barnes was stationed by the main entrance, greeting families with a flourish. I approached, a stack of official-looking documents in hand. Ms. Barnes, I said calmly, the show's over. I extended the court order. She snatched it, skimming the text. Her expression darkened. You went behind my back? We're raising money for local charities, Mr. Carter. Do you realize how heartless you look? I stayed composed. Don't manipulate me with charity talk. You invaded private land, you destroyed my property, your carnival ends now or the sheriff will shut it down. A flicker of fear crossed her face, but she quickly rallied. We have our own legal counsel, she snapped. This is nothing but intimidation. The carnival is set to end tonight anyway, so your injunction is moot. She tossed the papers aside, a defiant smirk curling her lip. My frustration flared again. Moot, is it? Well, if you cause further damage, I'll sue for every penny Mapleview has. She opened her mouth to retort, but at that moment a voice from behind me piped up. What's going on, Ms. Barnes? It was a mother holding her child's hand, clearly curious about the tense exchange. Ms. Barnes forced a bright smile, dismissing me with a wave. Just a small dispute. Enjoy the fair. I watched, anger pulsing as Ms. Barnes hurried off to attend to some booth. It was clear she had zero intention of abiding by the injunction right now. But ironically, the carnival was scheduled to close that evening, so maybe shutting it down forcibly wasn't worth traumatizing the families present. I decided on a different approach. Let them finish, but ensure Ms. Barnes faces the consequences afterward. Deep consequences. When the carnival ended at 9 p.m., volunteers began tearing down the booths and rides. By midnight, the Ferris wheel was partly dismantled, the bright lights gone, leaving only a gutted field strewn with trash, bent stakes, and flattened grass. My pasture, once lush and green, resembled a war zone. The next day, Ms. Barnes apparently assumed we'd all just move on. She was wrong. David and I filed a civil suit against Mapleview HOA for trespassing, property damage, and personal grievance. We also pursued an environmental complaint regarding the disposal of Carnival waste, but the biggest hammer was about to fall. Ms. Barnes had no clue I was a sitting judge, which gave me unique insight into how to navigate the local legal system. I don't preside over my own cases, of course, but I have colleagues who respect my perspective. A week later, Ms. Barnes discovered the lawsuit had advanced quickly through the docket. The HOA was summoned for a preliminary hearing. She tried to stall, claiming she needed more time, but the judge assigned to the case, a longtime friend named Harriet DeWitt, refused to delay. "This seems straightforward," Harriet said, scanning the paperwork. "We'll get to the facts immediately." The day of the hearing arrived and the courthouse buzzed with curiosity. A local reporter had caught wind that Judge Carter was also the plaintiff, though of course not presiding. Ms. Barnes marched in, flanked by 2 attorneys, presumably paid by the HOA's coffers. She shot me a glare as we gathered on opposite sides of the courtroom. Harriet entered, taking the bench with her usual calm efficiency. "Case number 2784, Carter versus Mapleview HOA," Harriet announced. She glanced over the documents. "Plaintiff is Mark Carter, property owner in Ridgeton County. Defendant is Mapleview HOA, represented by Ms. Anita Barnes in her capacity as president. We're here for a preliminary hearing on trespassing and property damage claims. Let's begin." Ms. Barnes's lead attorney strode forward with forced confidence. "Your Honor, this entire matter is a misunderstanding. Mapleview believed it had an easement for community events on that land. Our carnival was a charitable function. Mr. Carter is exploiting a trivial boundary dispute to harm the community." Harriet eyed him skeptically. "Easement? I see no recorded easement on file, nor any mention of one in the county records. Do you have the relevant documentation?" The attorney coughed, rifling through papers, glancing at Ms. Barnes, who squirmed. "We're still locating the original paperwork," he stammered. "It might be from older county archives." Harriet's eyebrows rose. "You mean to say you set up a large carnival, complete with rides, booths, and a Ferris wheel, on someone's pasture without verifying the boundary lines? That's quite bold." Ms. Barnes leaned forward, blurting, "We believed it was ours. We've always used that area for small gatherings." A hush fell over the courtroom. Then Harriet nodded at me. "Mr. Carter, do you have any evidence showing your ownership extends to the portion used for the carnival?" I approached politely, handing her a folder. "Yes, Your Honor. These are my grandfather's original deeds, plus a new survey from last year showing the exact lines. Mapleview's boundary stops well short of my fence line." Harriet examined the documents. "This looks quite clear," she said. "Ms. Barnes, do you dispute these findings?" The defense attorney tried one last angle. "We question the validity of that survey, and we believe the plaintiff implicitly allowed Mapleview usage for years." Harriet stared at him. "Implied permission? Mr. Carter, did you ever grant Mapleview the use of your pasture?" "No, Your Honor," I replied. "I explicitly refused when Ms. Barnes asked to expand a community garden onto my land last spring." Harriet tapped her pen. "So, not only did you refuse, you also have a clear boundary established. Mapleview, do you have any records of written permission?" The defense attorney shook his head, mumbling about unofficial community practices. After an exasperated sigh, Harriet summarized, "The evidence overwhelmingly suggests Mapleview HOA trespassed on Mr. Carter's land, causing damage. I'm inclined to set this matter for trial regarding damages unless you'd like to settle." The attorney looked to Ms. Barnes, who wore a defiant scowl. "We'll see you at trial," she spat, glaring in my direction. Harriet nodded. "So be it. Trial date in 4 weeks. She banged the gavel softly, concluding the hearing. As we left the courtroom, Ms. Barnes cornered me in the hallway, face flushed with anger. "You're really going to drag this through trial? Families had fun at that carnival. You want to punish them? I met her glare calmly. I want justice, Miss Barnes. You destroyed my fence, hammered carnival poles into my field. If you genuinely cared about the families, you'd accept responsibility, settle for the damages, and apologize. She stormed off, muttering about me being a vindictive farmer. I almost smirked. The next time we faced each other would be in a more formal setting, because I had a plan for the trial, one that hinged on revealing my position in a very public manner. In the weeks leading up to trial, David and I meticulously prepared. We documented every cost, repairing the fence, smoothing out the ruts, reseeding the pasture, plus emotional distress and potential safety hazards, the total soared. Ms. Barnes, for her part, tried rallying the HOA members. She circulated a newsletter casting me as a greedy landowner wanting a huge payday, ironically ignoring the fact that the carnival had raised plenty of money for charity. Where did that money go? No one seemed to know. Rumors spread of Ms. Barnes funneling a chunk of the carnival's proceeds into the HOA's general fund for future expansions. Trial day arrived. The local courthouse bustled with onlookers. Evidently, this case had become a hot topic in Ridgeton. Mapleview HOA supporters turned out, some wearing t-shirts reading "Support Our Carnival," but many residents had turned against Ms. Barnes, frustrated that their dues might skyrocket to cover legal fees. I stood by David near our table, exuding calm. Ms. Barnes and her attorney took the opposite side. Harriet presided again, this time with a full jury selected for civil damages. The jury was composed of local citizens, though Harriet took care not to pick anyone from Mapleview or folks likely swayed by Ms. Barnes's charm. The opening statements were tense. The defense harped on the charitable nature of the carnival, claiming I was overreacting. Then it was our turn. David, with his trademark clarity, laid out how Ms. Barnes knowingly ignored my property rights, forging ahead with a carnival that inflicted real damage. The defense squirmed, trying to downplay the harm, but the turning point came when we presented the actual costs for repairing the pasture. Then the real twist. Ms. Barnes' carnival had apparently made significant money, yet there was no record of it going to charity. A shady set of financial statements implied Ms. Barnes might have used my land to profit the HOA itself, possibly to line her own pockets. The jury's eyes widened. Midway through the proceedings, we introduced a surprise witness, a carnival vendor who testified that Ms. Barnes personally negotiated booth fees and pocketed a chunk of the revenue. The vendor said, "She told me a portion would go to local schools, but I never saw official receipts." Ms. Barnes turned pale. The atmosphere crackled with tension. Finally, it was time for Ms. Barnes herself to testify. She stepped up wearing her practiced politician smile. David questioned her gently at first, then cornered her about the boundary lines and the old easement. She fumbled, admitting she never saw the actual easement, only heard about it from older board members. Then David asked, "So you had no documented right, yet you moved forward with a large-scale carnival on Mr. Carter's pasture?" She faltered. "I believed it was for the community," she said meekly. The hush in the courtroom was palpable. Next, Harriet nodded at me. "Mr. Carter, do you wish to speak?" My heart thumped. This was an unusual step. Plaintiffs typically speak through their attorneys, but given my unique position in the justice system, Harriet allowed me a brief statement. I approached the witness stand, the jury's eyes on me, Miss Barnes shooting daggers from across the room. I took a slow breath. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I've dedicated my life to upholding the law. What Ms. Barnes did wasn't just a neighborly slip. She organized an entire carnival, hammered stakes, destroyed fences, and risked the safety of my livestock. She had plenty of chances to rectify the situation. Instead, she doubled down. All I want is for the truth to prevail and for Mapleview HOA to recognize private property boundaries. This lawsuit isn't about greed, it's about accountability." Ms. Barnes's attorney objected, claiming my statement was too emotional. Harriet overruled him. Then the defense tried to cross-examine me, perhaps hoping to rattle me. They asked if I was punishing Ms. Barnes to make a point. I calmly responded, "Yes, a point about respecting property rights." If Ms. Barnes thinks she can do as she pleases without consequences, she's mistaken, and I believe the court will agree. When the defense finally rested, Harriet instructed the jury. They deliberated for a surprisingly short time, less than 2 hours. Their verdict: Mapleview HOA was liable for trespass, property damage, and a portion of emotional distress. The total damages soared into 5 figures. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Ms. Barnes's face turned ashen. She tried to protest, but Harriet banged the gavel. As we stepped out, reporters crowded around, asking me how I felt. I recognized the same local news crew that had first interviewed Ms. Barnes. They asked, "Mr. Carter, do you think the verdict is fair?" I responded, "Yes." The jury recognized that no one, HOA or otherwise, can trample on private property. Justice is served. Another reporter asked, "How do you respond to allegations you used your status as a judge to sway the case?" I gave a tight smile. I wasn't the presiding judge. I was the plaintiff, just like any landowner defending his rights. The facts spoke for themselves. Meanwhile, Miss Barnes slipped out a side entrance, ignoring shouted questions about the carnival money. Rumors swirled that Mapleview members would push for her resignation. She'd cost them thousands, and her cloak of "it's for charity" was exposed as flimsy at best. Over the next few days, I heard from neighbors that Miss Barnes was indeed forced to step down. The HOA held an emergency vote, installing a more reasonable board president who apologized to me profusely. And the best part? The carnival fiasco inadvertently shined a spotlight on Mapleview's finances. The county initiated an investigation into Miss Barnes' handling of the fundraiser. If it turns out she pocketed some of that money, she might face criminal charges. I didn't relish seeing anyone behind bars, but I certainly wouldn't shed tears for someone who so blatantly abused her authority. In the aftermath, my pasture took months to fully recover. I hired a contractor to fix the fence, level the ground, replant grass. Mapleview's insurance ended up footing much of the bill thanks to the verdict. As I walked the field, I recalled my father's lessons about perseverance and standing up for what's right. He'd have been proud to see me fight for our land's integrity. This farmland might look like just grass and soil, but it's woven with decades of family history. No carnival or HOA arrogance could tear that away. I kept hearing from acquaintances, "Mark, you sure taught them a lesson." Maybe so, but at the end of the day, all I truly did was defend what was mine, using the very laws I swore to uphold. Ms. Barnes misread me as just a quiet rancher. She never suspected I was a renowned judge who could navigate the legal system better than any average homeowner. In a twist of poetic justice, the HOA that put on a carnival found itself the main act in a courtroom drama, and this time they were the ones put on trial. Now, Mapleview HOA is under new leadership. They asked if I'd ever be willing to host a more modest community picnic in the future, legally and with proper respect. I said I'd consider it if they approached me like honest neighbors, not entitled bullies. Meanwhile, Ms. Barnes vanished from the social scene. Some say she moved out of town entirely, too embarrassed to show her face in Ridgeton after her humiliating defeat. Ultimately, the real moral is simple: never assume you can run roughshod over someone else's property, especially not if that someone else has a black robe hanging in his closet waiting for the day he needs to bring down the gavel, figuratively or literally. You can have your funnel cakes and Ferris wheels, but if you build them on my land without permission, you're in for a rough ride. My father taught me the importance of fairness and justice. As a judge, I upheld those virtues in the courtroom. As a landowner, I enforced them in my own backyard. Even now, months later, I sometimes stand at the edge of my pasture at sunset, the horizon tinted gold, the grass swaying gently. I remember the carnival lights that once flickered here, the crowds that trampled the soil. It's all gone, replaced by the quiet hush my father loved so much. And in that hush, I find peace. Peace that no HOA carnival can disturb again. Not unless they're ready for a trial of their own making.